Grassy Narrows is an Anishinaabe First Nation in northern Ontario that has been dealing with the effects of mercury poisoning for nearly the past 60 years. The river which they relied on for food and water was poisoned by the Dryden Chemical Company factory dumping chemicals containing mercury. In total, about 10 tons were dumped between 1962 and 1970. The fish were declared to contain mercury and the factory was shut down in the 70s, but the damage was already done. To date, 90% of the community, including the younger generations who were not even born at the initial poisoning, exhibit symptoms of mercury poisoning. These symptoms include neurological issues like anxiety, irritability, and depression, childhood development issues like impaired motor skills, problems learning to speak, and problems with hand-eye coordination, and as they age, they can face increased issues including loss of motor function, muscle weakness, difficulty breathing, and degradation of speech and eyesight. Mercury poisoning is caused by eating food that contains mercury or being exposed to it in the environment. Symptoms only appear after continued exposure or sometimes one larger exposure. The government set up a disabilities board to handle the claims, but declines 75% of them and does not provide sufficient assistance to the other 25%. The children and young adults of this community grew up in an environment of sickness and suffering. This, coupled with all the other issues Indigenous communities face, such as the effects of residential schools, environmental racism, loss of culture, and more, has caused a prevalence of substance abuse, physical violence, and mental health problems. The community does not have sufficient health care to deal with the health problems of its residents, and does not have any mental health supports. Some have to travel to Winnipeg to receive proper treatment, a trip which is not covered by the government and is a major financial strain. They have protested countless times, begging the government for attention. One such protest saw 6 protesters carrying large barrels that read "Mercury Kills" and wearing protective gear outside Legislature. They dumped one of the barrels, leaving a gray metallic substance on the front lawn. All 6 were arrested. The substance was found not to be harmful, but they made their message clear. Still, the Wynne government did not listen. A few weeks earlier, a group of protesters were thrown out of Legislature for wearing shirts that read "Water is sacred." Showing slogans is considered a form of protest that is not allowed in Legislature. Both the provincial and federal governments have ignored Grassy Narrows for over half a century. This has caused a major distrust in the government and general pessimism towards any promises they might make. In 2017, for example, $85 million was promised by the provincial government to clean up the river of mercury, yet it still has not happened. In April 2020, the federal government promised $19.5 million for a mercury poisoning care facility in Grassy Narrows. An agreement was signed between Chief Rudy Turtle and Mark Miller, Minister of Indigenous Services, that means the community will receive this money to support construction costs. An additional $68.9 million was promised in 2021, bringing the total to around $90 million. The center is set to begin construction in early 2022 and open in 2023. While this looks like it will be built and be a major step in improving the lives of those affected by mercury poisoning, it took since the 70s, when the river was declared poisoned, for any of this to happen. Multiple governments of all parties have ignored the pleas from Grassy Narrows, only causing the problem to worsen and affect further generations. The Trudeau government itself has ignored many invitations to visit Grassy Narrows, claiming his schedule is too busy, while still finding time to sit with the Toronto Raptors after they win a championship. All in all, Grassy Narrows has endured major physical health problems, mental health problems, and government neglect, but is now, hopefully, getting the care they deserve. What should have been an unfortunate accident that was dealt with immediately was turned into a nightmare that has lasted half a century. I am in the conservation biology program because I want to work on conserving the environment and ensuring companies and the government are held responsible for the harm they cause. What happened to Grassy Narrows should never happen again and should be remedied as best we can now. I think people working in the environmental sector have a responsibility to listen to and work with Indigenous people and push the government to do the same. This was an ecological disaster that has ruined and ended lives, and it needs to be solved.